News channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Coming up, passengers arriving in the UK could face really long delays. Border control staff, they're the latest to go on strike at 6 airports. We'll have the latest from one of them. It's the strike mayor before Christmas. A 48-hour walkout by Royal Mail could leave festive mail undelivered. I'm going to be talking to the head of the union about this latest action. And a record number of small boats have crossed the Channel this year, 46,000 people. As it draws to a close, we'll be discussing whether the government really does have a viable plan to sort it out. And ho, 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 with just 2 days to go, we're going to be getting into the Christmas spirit. Joining me for the next hour is the journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly. And don't forget, you at home, an important part of this show, email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk and I'll put your points of view to those I speak to. That's what's coming up in this hour. But first, the latest news.
Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 12. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. We start with more on that breaking news story from central Paris. French authorities have now confirmed 2 people have died and 4 others have been wounded following a shooting. The suspected gunman, who's thought to be aged 69, has been detained. Paris police on Twitter say an operation's ongoing and is asking public to avoid the area around central Paris. According to local media, the shooting happened at the Kurdish Cultural Centre Ahmet Kaya in the 10th arrondissement. We'll bring you more on this story as we get it here on GB News. Back here, nurses in England will go on strike again on the 18th and 19th of January. The Royal College of Nursing says the walkout will go ahead unless the government opens negotiations over pay. Meanwhile, the GMB's called off a post-Christmas strike by ambulance workers. Members of the union in England and Wales were due to walk out on Wednesday in a dispute over pay and staffing. They will now walk out on January the 11th. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister's apologised for travel delays over Christmas as strike action by Border Force staff disrupts the plans of those hoping to travel by air today. Heathrow, Gatwick, Birmingham, Cardiff, Glasgow and Manchester airports will all be affected. However, Heathrow does say that it's operating as normal. Military personnel and volunteers from the civil service have been trained to step in. Rishi Sunak says public sector pay must be controlled in order to keep down inflation.
First of all, I'm really sad and I'm disappointed about the disruption that is being caused to so many people's lives, particularly at Christmas time. What I'm trying to do is make the right long-term decisions for the country, for everybody's benefit. And I think we all know that the major economic challenge we all face now is inflation. It's inflation that's eating into everyone's pay packets, it's rising the cost of living, and I want to make sure that we reduce inflation. Part of that is being responsible when it comes to setting public sector pay.
GB News understands airlines face millions of pounds in extra fuel costs as they deal with likely long delays during the Border Force strike. British Airways is one of a number of airlines instructing its pilots to take on additional fuel. It's to help jets cope with having to hold for an extra hour in the skies during the week-long walkout. A senior aviation source says the contingency plan is essential but extremely costly. Travel expert Sally Gethin told us the extra costs will be passed on to consumers.
Airfares definitely are going to rise over the next year due to lots of issues, the cost of fuel, for example, and airlines cannot bear the brunt of that. They've also had to reduce their schedules in advance to deal with the border control issue, so they're going to lose a lot of money over this.
The Prime Minister says it's completely reasonable to consider blocking new gender legislation in Scotland. Rishi Sunak's comments come after MSPs voted to pass the Gender Recognition Reform Bill yesterday. It'll remove the need for a medical diagnosis of gender dysphoria to obtain a gender recognition certificate. Holyrood has warned any attempted intervention from the UK government will be vigorously contested. A deep freeze is wreaking havoc across most of the United States and parts of Canada, with experts warning exposure to bare skin could lead to frostbite within minutes. The powerful Arctic winter storm has placed more than 100 million people under weather alerts ahead of the Christmas weekend. It's forecast to develop into what's being described as a bomb cyclone, unleashing heavy, blinding snow. Forecasters are warning the cold snap could bring with it the iciest Christmas in decades. While back here, motorists are being warned to expect long delays as millions hit the road to spend Christmas with friends and family. The AA says today will be the busiest day of the festive period, with an estimated 16.9 million journeys being made across the UK. A strike tomorrow by thousands of RMT members working at Network Rail is expected to make matters worse. The walkout will last until December the 27th. The Princess of Wales has paid tribute to the late Queen Elizabeth in a special broadcast set to air on Christmas Eve. A warning: the following contains flashing images. Catherine introduces the Royal Carol service held at Westminster Abbey, attended by other members of the royal family, including the King and Queen Consort. It's the first since the Queen died in September.
This year, we've invited hundreds of inspiring individuals to the service, those who showcase the power of connectedness and community values, allowing us to continue Her Majesty's tradition of recognising and thanking those who have gone above and beyond to support others. Her Majesty leaves with us an incredible legacy, and one that has deeply inspired many of us.
And we end with George Cohen, part of England's 1966 World Cumming winning team. He's died aged 83. Cohen played every minute of the victorious campaign on home soil and in total won 37 caps for his country. His former club Fulham announced his death this morning. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Andrew.
Andrew Pearce with you. Joining me for the next hour is the journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly. But I'm going to be talking to you about the strike Mayor before Christmas. Royal Mail postal workers, Border Force staff, they've both walked out over pay, jobs and conditions. Postal workers on a 2-day strike could mean you're not going to get your Christmas Day special deliveries. And if you're travelling in or out of the UK, you might face long delays because the passport staff are striking at Gatwick, Heathrow, Manchester, Cardiff and Birmingham. 8 days of industrial action. Let's go to our reporter Jack Carson, who's at Birmingham Airport, which is one of those affected. Jack, what's happening?
Well, Andrew, as you mentioned, 1,000 PCS, public and commercial service workers, are on strike for the next week and a bit. The only day they're not striking from now until the new year is the 27th, and so this is going to cause some disruption for those trying to get into the country and go through those passport checks, and certainly some checking in to leave the country over Christmas as well. One thing that the airports are pushing today to try and ensure that disruption is limited, and there isn't that much disruption when people are getting into the country, is the use of passport e-gates. They're hoping that if those can keep working properly, as we know they do have some problems sometimes, but if they can keep working properly, airports are saying, Heathrow, certainly here at Birmingham International as well, are saying that if those e-gates can work, then disruption should be limited as well. But with that, not everyone can use the e-gates. Children under 12 can't use the gates, so they'll still have to go through normal passport control, which is where we start to get some of those disruptions, some minor delays, because what's happened is with the PCS, with some of those members on strike, what's happening is civil servants, members of the Ministry of Defence and Army are having to come in and make up those numbers, and the Border Force Chief saying that because they're not up to the usual standard or speed, that essentially they should expect some delays there as well. We know that the reason they're striking is they want a 10% pay rise, pension security, and also job security as well, especially in terms of redundancy pay and a security around redundancy. It's one of the things that a lot of unions that are currently striking over want assurances over redundancy, and a lot of their making sure that their workers aren't going to receive redundancy in the next couple of years. But in terms of disruption, it's not major here at Birmingham International Airport. We've had some minor delays of 10-15 minutes. Of course, the problem that does cause is there is a bit of a domino effect in that kind of can delay other flights trying to come in and land here. We know, of course, from that GB News exclusive, that many of the flights going into London are having to be fuelled with about an extra half an hour's worth of fuel in case they have to go into a holding pattern because of delays on the ground. What that does mean is that with more fuel, some flights are ending, and some companies like BA are actually spending around £6,500 more to fuel their flights, which of course, with it being the first Christmas with no COVID restrictions, that mean airlines are struggling already and want a good Christmas of business, and with these disruptions, that's not going to do them any favours at all. The Home Office and, of course, Rishi Sunak have apologised for disruption this may cause with people trying to get into Christmas, but with only one day out of the next 8 where they're not striking, if you are arriving into the country or trying to leave the UK over Christmas, you are going to be disrupted by those Border Force strikes.
All right, thanks for that. That's Jack Carson at Birmingham Airport. Well, the postal workers are on strike too. Let's talk to the union's General Secretary, Dave Ward. Good afternoon to you, Dave Ward.
Good afternoon, Andrew.
It's the busiest time of the year for your industry, so it seems to me insane that you should be going on strike right now.
Before I answer that, Andrew, let me remind you, last week, by the way, you tweeted Royal Mail propaganda that this strike had no support amongst our members. And we offered you the opportunity to get out on the picket line and see our members and talk to them, and we know you never took that opportunity up. But look, we do understand the point that you're making about, there's customer disruption here. But what we would say to all customers, and this is the experience that we're getting out the customers are talking to our members and are understanding the posties position, which is this, we want to be out there delivering, but it is the company who are trying to wreck postal services for the future. Their proposals, and we have to be absolutely clear about this, will destroy daily deliveries that we currently do to 32 million addresses, including businesses across the UK. So we're trying to defend the service. We're not trying to wreck it. And we did offer Royal Mail the opportunity to suspend these strikes for the second time in 3 weeks. We made an offer. All we asked for the company in return was to get round the table, proper negotiations, not to introduce unagreed change while those talks were taking place, and to give us the assurance, which verbally they have started to talk about, that they're not going to introduce a new resourcing model to bring in self-employed workers who have to pay for their own vans, their own, they don't get holiday pay, they don't get sick pay, agency workers, and workers on 20% less terms and conditions. We asked them to give us those assurances and we would have suspended these strikes. They didn't want to do that. We're going to offer them again that opportunity to try and get this resolved early in the new year.
Dave, I hear what you're saying, but isn't the real truth here? The amount of mail being delivered is down 60%, I think, since 2005. By going on strike right now, people won't bother with Christmas cards again. They'll use emails. They'll find other ways to deliver their mail, which is why I'm asking you again. It surely is the worst time to go on strike because your industry is effectively fighting for its life already.
Look, the situation that we're in, the gravity of the situation, when you talk about mail decline, nobody in the union, no postal worker is in denial that letters are in decline. We're not in some romantic fight for the past here. We're trying to build the future of this company. And what I would say to you about letter deliveries is, and economists will back this up, you know, yes, it's going to decline and that decline will continue, but it's not never going to be there. There's still 7 million people in the UK who use the letter services that Royal Mail provide. But we want to be delivering parcels as well. We want to be delivering a 24/7 network. That was the agreement, Andrew, that we had. We've got commercial propositions to put to the company about how they can build future services on top of the current infrastructure. I come back to the point again. The people who are insane here are the leadership of Royal Mail who are trying to impose changes that will destroy this company forever. It's not about growing the business. It's about an asset stripping agenda. And they are not seeing the opportunities to innovate the services to do the very thing which you're asking us to do, which is to get back and try and build the business. You know, I've got to say to you that you need to hold these people to account because these type of business leaders, and you see them in other main businesses in the UK, they don't know how to build businesses anymore. All they know is how to attack the workers' terms and conditions. They go for the cheapest possible win to pay for shareholders. And if we carry on in the UK with these type of people at the top of businesses who have no support amongst the workforce for what they're trying to do, we're going to end up not just killing companies like Royal Mail, we're going to kill the country and all decent jobs everywhere, and the economy will never grow.
Just briefly, Dave, because we haven't got much time, are you not in danger of walking into a trap here? The Royal Mail will think letters are dead, they're going to be even... You're finishing off the industry with this strike and they'll just concentrate more on parcels.
We're fighting to save the industry, Andrew. We want to deliver parcels. We want to grow parcel traffic. I don't know how many... I've just answered the question, Andrew. We're trying to build a 24/7 network that uses the current infrastructure to grow and innovate products and services, adding social value to the UK, growing local businesses, offering local-to-local services. That's the vision that we've got. That's not the vision that Royal Mail are putting forward. And that's why our members are massively supporting this strike action.
All right, that's Dave Ward. He's General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union. Thanks so much for joining us, Dave, and have a good Christmas. Now, there's been some breaking news. Mark White is our Home and Security Editor. A shooting in Paris. Tell us more.
Yeah, 2 people, we're told, have died and at least 4 others have been injured in a shooting in central Paris. It's in the 10th arrondissement near Gare du Nord railway station. We're told that the epicentre of this gun attack was a Kurdish cultural centre in that area. There is a very significant security operation now underway, as you would imagine, in that area. The latest we've been told from prosecutors in Paris is that a suspect, a 69-year-old man, has been arrested at the scene, and the incident as such, in terms of the wider threat, is over, that they have managed to contain it. But, of course, at this time of the year, there is always a heightened sense of concern about the potential for terrorist attacks.
I was going to say, is it terror linked?
We just don't know what the motive is at this stage, but it will, of course, be uppermost in the minds of the security services as they try to figure out exactly what happened. Not just, of course, in Paris, other European countries, the UK as well. The public are being told to be extra vigilant at this time of year because Islamist extremists in particular are out looking, as we know, to cause as much mayhem as possible.
A lot of people out and about because it's Christmas. It's also, of course, a very important Christian festival. So that could be a target for Muslim extremists.
When you get, exactly at this time of year as well, mass gatherings, and we know, of course, it is sites where people gather in numbers that makes them an attractive target as far as terrorists are concerned. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves because we don't know what the motivation was behind this. We just know it was a gun attack, that a 69-year-old man, according to prosecutors, is in custody. The immediate threat has been dealt with. But of course, as the investigators piece together exactly what's happened, they'll want to know, was this a one-off? Could there be others involved in potential linked attacks? Because we've seen with other terrorist attacks that you get linked attacks that take place in short order. So people on alert in Paris at the moment. The authorities are telling them to avoid that central area of Paris while they deal with this incident.
Danny Kelly's with me. Danny, it's the worst thing for any major city at this time, if potentially a terror attack or a gunman on the loose.
Yeah, I think it's natural that we do have to rather rule in until it's ruled out Islamic terrorism. We have the hallmarks of a Kurdish, which is an Islamic faith, a Kurdish faith centre. We have a shooting spree. I think it's natural, and I think for a lot of people listening to the radio and watching the television, I think that uppermost in their mind, it will be a case of ruling it out before it's ruled in, or vice versa, ruled in before it's ruled out. It's a frightening time, isn't it? Because it is a Christian festival, it is Christmas, and of course, don't forget, I think it was about 10 years ago, you had that terrible Charlie Hebdo atrocity where these two maniacs ran loose in Paris with AK-47s, just wiping out anyone that came in front of their midst. It's a frightening time sometimes, you know, to be in a city centre at Christmas.
It's certainly. Just finally, Mark, I didn't ask you, what's happened to the gunman?
He's in custody at the moment. He'll be questioned. I should add, you know, we're talking about Islamist extremism. There is also a threat from the far right. It's a growing threat, but it is very small in comparison to the threat that the security services across Europe deal with on a daily basis from Islamist extremism.
We've got scenes here of Paris now with the emergency services. So
this is the area in 10th arrondissement at the moment. What you can see are the paramedics from the fire service and the ambulance service in France, because of course their fire service actually take on paramedic duties as well, and we've seen just in the last few minutes or so some people being taken away. Now the reports are suggesting that at least 4 people on top of the 2 fatalities have been injured, and some of those critically injured. But this will come out in the fullness of time. It's still very much an active situation, even though the police are suggesting that the wider threat they believe they now have under control. But it is still, you know, as a very active crime scene there. They think that all the casualties have been obviously accounted for and taken off to hospital. But you can see the French security service personnel still there on scene. They don't know if there's a wider threat, which is the real problem.
That's Mark White, who's our Home and Security editor. We'll be hearing more from him now. Coming up, as inquests open into the death of those 4 migrants who died when their dinghy capsized in the Channel last week, we're going to be talking about what can be done to stop people attempting the perilous journey. Because let's face it, the government has failed miserably so far. I'll be back with you shortly.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Well, the inquests have opened into the deaths of those 4 people who died when their dinghy capsized in the Channel last week. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, she says she will destroy the business model of the evil people smugglers. But how many times have we heard politicians say that? But with more than 45,000 people crossing the Channel, we want less talk, more action, please. Joining me now to talk about how possibly to solve this is the former leader of UKIP, who's a border control expert Henry Bolton, and also international human rights lawyer David Haig. Gentlemen, good afternoon to you. Henry Bolton first. We know the government have failed utterly and totally to resolve this situation. How do you fix it?
Well, Andrew, there's a temptation, isn't there, to think of one approach as a silver bullet. And actually, that's not the case. There are many aspects to this, all of which need to be dealt with concurrently. And what we've seen from the government and the Home Office is reactive rather than proactive responses to adverse headlines, which tend to be one-off kind of activities, rather than having a fully comprehensive and integrated strategy that deals with the upstream disruption of the people smuggling networks. And I mean, in that sense, if we go back to 2001 to 2006, the UK was engaged in an intelligence and proactive tactical sense on the ground in places like the Balkans and so on and elsewhere, actually going after, with local law enforcement, we were going after the people smugglers. And if you want to disrupt their business model, put them in jail. And the way to do that is to go out onto their home turf and hunt them down with local law enforcement and make sure they get jailed there. We were doing it until Tony Blair pulled the funding for it in 2006. But then you come all the way back. So that also requires law enforcement intelligence engagement. It requires diplomatic engagement with those countries, of course. But as you come closer, then we need to start working with the European Union. And we do. That may sound strange coming from me, but these people, most of them are coming into the European Union across the EU's external borders down in the south, coming across the Mediterranean and coming in from the east. And what we've got to do is we've got to work with them and say, look, this is a problem for you. It's a problem for us. We need to work together on this upstream disruption. We've not been doing that. We've been approaching the French. And if you remember, Andrew, one of the big reasons that we wanted to leave the European Union was so that we could regain control over our borders. And that's actually absolutely the case. The French don't have full control over their borders. They're not playing the game properly. That's true. They're not helping. But the real sort of authority here rests in Brussels. And I'd say also on that, those people who said that we were able to send people back whilst we were members of the European Union are wrong. Wrong, wrong, wrong. We were part of something called the Dublin III Agreement, which enabled us, in theory, to return people to the country, the European Union country through which they entered the European Union. However, the EU put a moratorium on being sent back to Greece and Italy, the two main countries, and also we ended up being sent more people through Dublin III than we were able to transfer out of the UK.
Henry, I want to bring David Haig in here. David Haig, is Henry Bolton right about that?
I think there's a lot of what Henry said, certainly in terms of what's needed in terms of a comprehensive policy, and not just a policy, actual action. Like you said, we hear a lot of rhetoric coming out, a lot of PR stunts, like which you could essentially call the Rwanda policy, which it's not going to happen. You know, we're not going to see any flights taking off for a long time. They made the Home Office obviously won the High Court judgment recently, but there'll be an appeal, and then maybe even to the Supreme Court, and then the European Court of Human Rights also may get back involved. So I think, you know, there does need to be a proper comprehensive review. That's something that doesn't appear possible by the Conservative government in the time that they've got left. So it's you know, and at the end of the day, you have people dying in the Channel now. I think the inquest is going to be very interesting to look at what the results could come back with.
Henry Bolton, there's a point there that the Conservatives have got maximum 2 years for this next general election. They're looking like they're going to lose the election. Can they fix this before that?
Well, I think, Andrew, what they've got to demonstrate is they've not got to actually solve it. What they've got to do is demonstrate that they've got a credible plan that is starting to take significant effect. And I think they can do that. I mean, I've written border strategies for other countries, and we've done it in 8 months. It can be done. The problem is that whether that's been in Central Asia, whether that's been in the Balkans, whether that's been in North America, you've had governments that have wanted to engage on the problem, and civil servants have wanted to engage on the problem. We do seem, and I wouldn't just label the Conservatives in this way, but we seem to have politicians and civil servants in this country that simply are incapable of seeing the big picture, putting together a cross-government strategy. It's not just on our borders, Andrew. It's on our healthcare. It's our education. It's our public transport. All of these things are in a mess because there are one-off policies, one-off sort of ideas that get presented and tried to drive through, but none of them are coherent. They don't have a strategy. And that's the problem. We've got now a generation of politicians who I believe simply don't have the strategic acumen to govern this country. And we've got to deal with that. It's not just borders, as I say.
All right, Henry, thank you for that. That's Henry Bolton. Just very briefly, David Haig, what would you be telling the Home Secretary to do right now to try to get to grips with this?
Eventually, what they need to do is get an effective policy in place, put it in action. Like Henry said, it shouldn't be that difficult, but it obviously is for them. And I think that's the thing that needs to do, not just talk about policies and not do PR policy gimmicks that get stuck in the various courts, etc. Like Rwanda, I would imagine that it would be very unlikely that anyone actually takes off on any plane to Rwanda before the next general election. So actual action, but that's something that they don't seem capable of.
All right, that was Henry Bolton and David Haig. Thanks for joining me. Danny Kelly's in the studio with me. That's rather depressing, isn't it? Henry Bolton saying there could be a way they could do it in 8 months, and our lawyer friend David Haig saying no plane will be going to Rwanda anytime soon. The GBNews own poll shows 40% of people support the Rwanda plan.
Sure. The only way I can see it stopping is if you saturate 70-odd miles of French coastline with police and soldiers, literally saturate it. And whenever they see a dinghy, you quite simply go and stab it. That's going to take a long time because These people smugglers. Listen, Henry said just go and nick the people smugglers. It's obviously not as easy as Henry believes, just going to arrest these criminal gangs. Otherwise, I would have thought that unless the French are taking a drink off the speaker.
Perish the thought.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, the human rights lawyer who quite correctly said, look, people are drowning. I wouldn't get in a dinghy. If I wanted to make sure that I didn't drown, I wouldn't get in that dinghy. So you have to ask yourself, what are they escaping from in France? France is a safe country. But there's been 3 tragic deaths this year. 45,000 people have come over. That means the odds of not drowning, 15,000 to 1. And that's an odd I'd take.
OK, now coming up, have we lost our Christmas spirit? I don't mean the alcoholic type. Should carols be rewritten by the woke brigade? And I'll be getting expert tips on how to avoid family drama at Christmas. But first, your news update.
Good afternoon, it's 12:33. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. More now on that developing story from the French capital. 2 people have been killed and several others wounded after a gunman opened fire in central Paris. A 69-year-old suspect has been detained by police in connection with the attack, which took place at a Kurdish cultural centre. Paris authorities have confirmed the incident, which happened not far from the Gare de l'Est station, is now over, and we'll bring you more as we get it on that story. Back here, nurses will go on strike in England again on the 18th and 19th of January. The Royal College of Nursing says the walkout will go ahead unless the government opens negotiations over pay. Meanwhile, the GMB unions called off a post-Christmas strike by ambulance workers. Members of the union in England and Wales were due to walk out on Wednesday in a dispute over pay and staffing. They'll now walk out on January the 11th. The Prime Minister's apologised for Christmas travel disruption following strike action by Border Force staff today. Gatwick, Birmingham, Cardiff, Glasgow and Manchester airports are all affected. However, Heathrow does claim it's operating as normal. Military personnel and volunteers from the civil service have been trained up to step in. Rishi Sunak insists public sector pay must be controlled to keep down inflation.
First of all, I'm really sad and I'm disappointed about the disruption that is being caused to so many people's lives, particularly at Christmas time. What I'm trying to do is make the right long-term decisions for the country, for everybody's benefit. And I think we all know that the major economic challenge we all face now is inflation. It's inflation that's eating into everyone's pay packets, it's rising the cost of living, and I want to make sure that we reduce inflation. Part of that is being responsible when it comes to setting public sector pay.
And George Cohen, part of England's 1966 World Cup winning team, has died aged 83. Cohen played every minute of the victorious campaign on home soil and in total won 37 caps for his country. His former club Fulham announced his death this morning. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Andrew will be back in just a moment.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's nearly Christmas, isn't it? A time to be with family, friends, a bit of excess, a bit of drinking, lots of food. Most of us look forward to it, but not everyone. For some, it's nothing to look forward to at all. And many people are feeling the pinch, so if you pardon the pun, can you blame them for being a bit of a Grinch? Should we now try to rediscover our Christmas spirit? And Danny Kelly, I'm not talking about gin and tonic. I'm talking about the true meaning of Christmas, which is going to be explained now by Gavin Ashenden, who's, of course, a former chaplain to Queen Elizabeth II. Gavin, are we losing our way at Christmas? We talk about presents, we talk about plum duff pudding, all that sort of stuff. How often do we talk about why we're celebrating Christmas, the birth of Christ?
Well, Andrew, I think it's the other way around. I think Christmas comes once a year and it helps reorientate us. It's a wonderful festival which challenges our routine way of life and offers us a different vision of how to be a human being and to recalibrate our value systems. So I think inevitably we lose our way during the year, but Christmas in particular and Easter are times when we can take a new stock of how we're living as human beings and what we want out of life.
And are you disappointed that more people won't be at church over Christmas? When I was a kid, we used to go to midnight mass, and then the next morning, Mum had us in church at 11 o'clock in the morning. Never missed, and we never complained.
Yes, when I was an Anglican vicar for 40 years, and I remember seeing the numbers slowly dwindle. I'm heartbroken. I think it's incredibly sad because people are missing out on a relationship with the living God, who is the only person capable of changing human nature. And day in, day out, the news tells us how much human nature needs changing. Here is a moment when if people could only find the energy and the enthusiasm and then the integrity, then their lives could be changed too. There are lots of families in the mess. People are in suffering. We need to find light in the darkness, love as an antidote to hate, forgiveness as an antidote to revenge. There's so much that Christmas can bring people if only they'd take the trouble to go and step into a church.
Yeah, most people think Christmas brings a lot of things to people. It brings a hangover, it brings a bit of gut rot, and it brings a lot of presents, some of which they don't even want.
Well, there are two kinds of Christmases. There's the external social one, which is fine. We need to party in the dark time of the year. But the trouble is we get an enormous amount of stimulus for our bodies and for our social lives. But we have this huge famine of the soul in the West. And it's precisely this soul famine that Christmas addresses. And it's the soul famine that's at the heart of the misery, the loneliness, the fractured relationships, and the anger and the rage that we get caught up in the rest of the year. Christmas is a great antidote to the human condition. It would be great to take it more seriously.
And what about you personally, Gavin? Will you be midnight massing or will you be mass on Sunday morning? Or both?
Yeah, yes, no. I'm afraid both. I'm certainly midnight massing, but I sing in a tiny little Catholic choir in the Welsh marches, and our very ambitious organist has written a piece he wants performed. And so, in case I was tempted to lie in bed on Christmas morning, I should be up singing for him to say thank you for providing the music for our wonderful little congregation. So,
and it's got
out of love and gratitude, I'll be up.
Very good. Is it a Christmas theme to what he's written?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, it's about Our Lady. It's a splendid piece. And so yes, midnight mass and first thing in the morning.
Very good. Well, look, happy Christmas to you. That's Gavin Ashenden, who is, of course, a former chaplain to Queen Elizabeth II. Of course, it's going to be the King's Speech this year. That will be quite a change in tradition, won't it? And now, the story that really infuriated me this week, a Christmas carol, a particularly traditional carol, has been updated to be, guess what, more inclusive. And it sparked a debate, naturally, about rewriting classic hymns. A church choir in Loughborough performed an updated version of God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen, honouring women who by men have been erased. Oh, can you believe this? And in a reference to apparently the LGBTQ+ community, that acronym gets longer and longer, queer and questioning people. Should we really be rewriting carols to be more woke? Of course not. Let's talk now to Toby Young, General Secretary of the Free Speech Union. Toby, how are you?
I'm good, Andrew. How are you?
No, I'm a good Catholic boy and I like my carols, and I don't like carols like God Rest You Merry Gentlemen being rewritten by the woke brigade. That's what's happened here.
Yeah, it is quite shocking. I mean, we've seen the Museum of the Home relabel its traditional Christmas exhibit the Winter Festival exhibit in order to avoid offending non-Christians and in an effort to be more inclusive. Joe Biden, in his Christmas address this year, managed to speak for something like 5 minutes without mentioning Christ. But you wouldn't expect the Church of England in a carol service to eliminate any reference to Christ in one of the carols. That seems an extraordinary step for the church to take. Biden, perhaps, the Museum of the Home, okay, but for the church to eliminate references to Christ in an effort to be more inclusive, that seems a bit odd.
Very odd. There's always a possibility, of course, Toby, that Joe Biden forgot to mention Christ because we know he is a bit absent-minded these days. But I suppose you could turn the tables here, Toby. You are part of the Free Speech Union. It's the right of people to rewrite a traditional carol.
Yes, I suppose that's true. And we could indeed add our own lyrics and insert references to Christ back in whilst singing the carols in the pews, though it could get a little chaotic and sound even worse than it normally does. Yeah, I mean, I think what's odd, I think, is that for people attending a carol service at this church, even I'm sure they would, die in a ditch to defend free speech. They wouldn't expect the vicar to exercise her right to free speech, and it was a female vicar in this case, by changing the carols in this way. I mean, one explanation for why people have kind of embraced the woke cult and decided to follow it, almost as if they were following a religion, is that it fills a God-shaped hole in their lives, Andrew. They're looking for a sense of meaning and purpose. Christianity no longer provides that, so they find an alternative source of meaning and purpose in embracing this new cult. But what's so surprising about this example is, well, why has the Church of England embraced this cult? Is there a God-shaped hole now in the Church of England? We often joke that, Church of England vicars, archbishops don't really believe in God. They're too wet even to assert that they believe in God. But maybe it's true. Maybe the woke cult is playing the same sort of role for them as it does for non-Christian people. It provides them with a sense of meaning and purpose that they don't get in the church, even though they're officers of the church.
Fascinating. That's Toby Young from the Free Speech Union. Thanks for joining me, Toby, and happy Christmas to you. Danny Kelly, look, maybe it's because I'm a good Catholic boy, or not such a good Catholic boy, but brought up a Catholic. I love carols. I went to a carol concert last week in the church in Farm Street, one of the most beautiful churches in London. The idea that I would have sang a carol that had been rewritten so clumsily and in such a way, I'd have just sung, as Toby Young suggested, the right words.
Yeah, I don't think it is clumsy. I think it's quite deliberate. And I think that these people are hardwired differently to normal everyday folk like you, me, and Toby. I just don't get why they do it. Why do they feel it's important, just to use this word woke, why do they feel it's important to go totally woke, which is starting to drip, infuriate people, because it starts to affect lots of other ways of our daily life. Today we're talking about an Anglican church who have changed the carols to be more inclusive. But if you start to challenge that, then they throw it back at you and say, well, why does it annoy you? And then I say, but why is it important to you? And they say, OK, we want to be more inclusive and progressive. And I say, but is that what church is all about? Is that why I go to church? Because I'm not religious. But if I went to church and I was following the doctrine of the Bible, or the New Testament, then I would think that that was incongruous with the New Testament and the teachings of Christ.
I wonder if the fact that the most recent census showed the number of people ticking the box Christian, 46%. In 2001, 71%.
So 71%?
It was 71% tick the box Christian in 2001. In the last census, 20 years later, 2021, only 46%.
Wow. Well, there's two factors. We've got mass immigration with people from all around the world, but also we've got, listen, I'm an atheist. I'm sorry, agnostic at best, atheist in reality. And when we heard Gavin earlier on, who was the chaplain to the Queen, and he was saying that God is the only person that can change all of these horrors in the world, well, in that one sentence, you can understand why no one, or 46% or whatever, don't believe in God.
Yeah, that's Danny Kelly. I'm not sure I should be having an agnostic stroke atheist in the studio.
You can always convert me.
Before Christmas Eve.
With some holy water.
Yeah, well, I've got some holy water from the Holy Land, actually. Well, it is Christmas. It's the most wonderful time of the year, or so the song goes. But is it? Let's be honest, not everybody likes Christmas. Spending time with loved ones can be a pressure. Danny Kelly, for instance, is spending Christmas with his in-laws, who I know he's very, very fond of.
What a rat.
We get gifts that we don't always want, which can lead to, it can be almost a power keg for Christmas conflict. Here to help with some tips to navigate the festive period, or the festive sandpit, is the psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. Lucy, help Danny. He's spending Christmas with his in-laws, and he's absolutely thrilled to bits about that, as are many people watching. They've got in-laws coming, and we know it'll be great for Danny, but it might not be for everyone.
Well, lots of people do like their in-laws, but I think it's really important to work out on whose territory you are, because obviously if you're going to their property, to their home, then there might be traditions or guidelines that they follow. But then if they come to you, then you have different family traditions. And it's probably about respecting who is the host. You're kind of in charge, you're opening up your home. But the way to avoid quite a lot of conflict is to set some boundaries and to set some expectations, really. You can have a really beautiful Christmas if you think about how much time you're spending with someone, how much money you spend on presents collectively. Maybe there should be a rule about it. Nobody spends more than £5, particularly during this cost of living crisis. And also maybe there are topics that don't get aired. And I'm not just talking about, the things like Brexit or anything to do with politics, but really important things like whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie. That can be very contentious around the dinner table.
Lucy, it's true, isn't it, that after Christmas, relate and divorce lawyers get a lot of business?
Yes. Actually, not just divorce lawyers, but also psychotherapists see a huge spike in referrals in that week after Christmas and leading up to New Year. Because I think, as Gavin, your previous guest, was talking about, it becomes an annual ritual, because Christmas happens every year, for people to think about where they want their life to be going forward. Christmas comes at the end of the year, the turn of the year. We've just had the winter solstice, so the days are now actually going to start to get longer. And people are going to start to think about, what do I want going forward? Has my relationship really given me that much fulfillment this year? Do I need to change it? Do I need to get out? Or do I need to think about ways in which I grow as a person? So a lot of soul searching. I thought Gavin's phrase of there being a famine of the soul was really it gave me goosebumps to hear that, because I think a lot of people will be thinking at the end of 2022 in particular, how do I want my life to be going forward? Who do I want in it? And what are the things that give me purpose and give me pleasure?
Finally, Lucy, what are you doing at Christmas?
Well, I love that you mentioned carols, because I am almost worried that I wasn't going to have enough voice to speak to you today, because I've been doing so much carol singing, including on Piccadilly last weekend in aid of cystic fibrosis. So there are going to be plenty more carols to come, it has to be said.
Sounds great. That's Lucy Beresford, the psychotherapist. And Danny, if you do have difficulty over Christmas, we can send you to see Lucy. Lucy, very nice to see you. Happy Christmas. Now, let's get your views on the politics of the day. Dear Andrew, this comes from Ian. The workers are the worst enemy of the unions themselves. Sorry, let me read that again. The worst enemy is the union themselves. Do not give in to any of them. David says, no other courier company is forced to cover every address. The workers are being undermined, so 0-hour contracts without pensions or holiday pay are their reward. I stand with the Royal Mail. And Ross says, I'm very much against striking in general. It does more harm than good. And Sylvia says, they all say they want to negotiate, but only if it's on their terms. The attitude is, do as I say or else. Now, it's Christmas. And it's that time of year. And, Danny, I have bought you...
You haven't got me a present, have you?
A Secret Santa present.
Well, it's not you. It's open to who's got it, but you've just told me. So you've bought me a Secret Santa. Well, do you know, funnily enough...
Oh, this almost has an air of spontaneity.
Now, look, I don't know who bought you this because
Right.
it's a Secret Santa gift. But I know that Santa's put a lot of effort into it.
Are you opening it now? You've got to.
Yeah, I'd like the camera maybe to have a look at you whilst you open
No,
that.
this is not politically correct wrapping paper.
What is it?
Oh, I know. I think I know what this is.
Show it to the camera.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God, it's Harry and Meghan. That is not going on my mantelpiece anytime soon.
My wife noticed...
That is brilliant.
Thank you. My wife noticed that when you do stuff remotely from home, that there's some very prominent photographs of women in the background. One is Thatcher and one is your beloved sister.
And Joan Collins.
Joan Collins. There's three of them.
Yeah.
Just show the camera a little. Face the camera. Come on,
Look,
Andrew.
Harry and flipping Meghan.
Oh, Secret Santa's left the price on.
Oh, God.
Secret Santa! What's wrong with you, man?
We had a limit of £5.
Well, I spent £7 on that.
Well, you spent too much.
Thermal socks, thank you. Thermal
That's
socks.
Danny Kelly. Happy Christmas to you.
Happy Christmas, mate.
You're watching me, Andrew Pearce. Stay with us. There's plenty more still to come. I'm back after a little break.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather forecast from the Met Office. The Christmas weekend is going to be pretty mild, at least to start with. It is going to turn colder by Boxing Day. As well as being mild, it's going to be windy with some rain around. Certainly plenty of rain today. This weather front slowly heading northwards, making for some pretty grim conditions on the busy roads, particularly parts of the M1 up through the M6 and the M62. A very wet afternoon across much of northern England and Northern Ireland. The rain is edging away from southern areas, so brighter skies arriving here, and mostly fine across Scotland until later on when the rain creeps into the south. Just a few showers. Cold across northern Scotland, temperatures not much above freezing, but very mild further south, double digits, if not into the teens. But feeling cold under this rain band. It is mostly rain, and it will be rain as it hits the central belt of Scotland this evening. But to the north of the central belt, over the hills, we will start to see some snow falling overnight. The rain clearing from northern England, Northern Ireland for a time, but some showers will drift in through the night. It's going to be bluff streets, windy today. It stays fairly gusty overnight. That'll all add up to a fairly mild night. Temperatures staying at 7 or 8 Celsius across the south. Still some touches of frost in northern Scotland. Still the colder air here, so still some snow falling, especially on the higher routes for a time on Christmas Eve morning. For many, it's a bright and breezy kind of day. There will be some showers, mostly in the west, but a good part of the Midlands, eastern England, staying dry and fine through Christmas Eve. And it will be mild, double digits almost across the board. Still fairly cold, though, across much of Scotland, especially where the rain and hill snow persists. More showers coming in during Christmas Eve evening, so it could be quite lively out there. Some heavy bands of showers moving through on gusty winds, and that's how we go into Christmas Day. Christmas Day looking drier for many. Some rain in the southeast, wet in the northwest, and then it turns colder for all of us on Boxing Day.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Hi, it's Andrew Pearce here on GB News with you until 2 o'clock. With me in the studio, I'm delighted to say, is Emma Burnell, the journalist and playwright. We've got a lot coming up in the programme, the latest on the Paris shooting, which 3 people have been killed. We're seeing live pictures from the scene right now. Our home and security editor, Mark White, will join me with an update. And it's Christmas holiday time, but my word, they're being disrupted by strikes. Strikes on the road, strikes on the trains, everywhere. Controversial gender reforms in Scotland passed yesterday in what some said was a dark day for women and children. We'll be discussing this and we're also going to be talking to the former Health Minister, Edwina Currie, about the nurses' strike. Don't forget to email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk. That's what's coming up this hour. But first, the latest headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 1 minute past 1. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom, and we start with that developing story in France. It's now been confirmed 3 people excuse me, have been killed and several others wounded after a gunman opened fire In central Paris, a 69-year-old suspect has been detained by police in connection with the attack, which took place at a Kurdish cultural centre. According to French media, the suspect was known to police and allegedly attacked a migrant camp last year. Officers in Paris say they're investigating racism as a possible motive behind the shooting. And we'll bring you more on that story here on GB News as we get it. Nurses in England will go on strike again on the 18th and 19th of January. The Royal College of Nursing says the walkout will go ahead unless the government opens up negotiations over pay. Meanwhile, the GMB's called off a post-Christmas strike by ambulance workers in England and Wales. They were due to walk out on Wednesday in a dispute over pay and staffing. They'll now strike on January the 11th. The union's National Secretary, Rachel Harrison, thanked the public for their support.
The public are deeply worried about our NHS, and we are too. People across the country have been incredible in backing our members and NHS workers, and we care so much about them. That's why we are suspending the proposed GMB industrial action on the 28th of December. We know the public will appreciate being able to enjoy Christmas without any additional anxiety.
The Prime Minister's apologised for Christmas travel disruption following strike action by Border Force staff today. Heathrow, Gatwick, Birmingham, Cardiff, Glasgow and Manchester airports will all be affected. However, Heathrow claims it's operating as normal. Military personnel and volunteers from the civil service have been trained to step in. Rishi Sunak insists public sector pay must be controlled to keep down inflation.
First of all, I'm really sad and I'm disappointed about the disruption that is being caused to so many people's lives, particularly at Christmas time. What I'm trying to do is make the right long-term decisions for the country, for everybody's benefit. And I think we all know that the major economic challenge we all face now is inflation. It's inflation that's eating into everyone's pay packets, it's rising the cost of living, and I want to make sure that we reduce inflation. Part of that is being responsible when it comes to setting public sector pay.
Meanwhile, GB News understands airlines face millions of pounds in extra fuel costs as they deal with likely long delays during the Border Force strike. British Airways is one of a number of airlines instructing its pilots to take on additional fuel to help jets cope with having to hold for an extra hour in the skies during the week-long walkout. A senior aviation source says the contingency plan's essential but extremely costly. The Prime Minister says it's completely reasonable for the UK government to consider blocking new gender legislation in Scotland. Rishi Sunak's comments come after MSPs voted yesterday to pass the Gender Recognition Reform Bill. It'll remove the need for a medical diagnosis of gender dysphoria to obtain a gender recognition certificate. Holyrood has warned any attempted intervention from the UK government will be vigorously contested. A deep freeze is wreaking havoc across most of the United States and parts of Canada, with experts warning exposure to bare skin could lead to frostbite within minutes. The powerful Arctic winter storm has placed more than 100 million people under weather alerts ahead of the Christmas weekend. It's forecast to develop into what's being described as a bomb cyclone, unleashing heavy, blinding snow. Forecasters are warning the cold snap could bring with it the iciest Christmas in decades. While back here, motorists are being warned to expect long delays as millions hit the roads to spend Christmas with friends and family. The AA says today will be the busiest day of the festive period, with an estimated 16.9 million journeys being made across the UK. A strike tomorrow by thousands of RMT members working at Network Rail is expected to make matters worse. The walkouts due to last until December the 27th. The Princess of Wales has paid tribute to the late Queen Elizabeth in a special broadcast set to air on Christmas Eve tomorrow. A warning, the following contains flashing images. Catherine introduces the Royal Carol service held at Westminster Abbey, attended by other members of the royal family, including the King and Queen Consort. It's the first since the Queen died in September.
This year, we've invited hundreds of inspiring individuals to the service, those who showcase the power of connectedness and community values. allowing us to continue Her Majesty's tradition of recognising and thanking those who have gone above and beyond to support others. Her Majesty leaves with us an incredible legacy, and one that has deeply inspired many of us.
And George Cohen, part of England's 1966 World Cup winning team, has died aged 83. Cohen played every minute of the victorious campaign on home soil and in total won 37 caps for his country. His former club Fulham announced his death this morning. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Andrew.
Well, with me in the studio for the next hour is the playwright and journalist Emma Burnell. I'm delighted to say, but first let's get back to that breaking news from Paris. The death toll is now 3 following the shooting at a Kurdish cultural centre. The 69-year-old man who's been arrested, Mark White, a Home and Security editor, known to the police, involved in racist incidents last year. You alluded to the fact it could be, if it's terrorism, the far right. It appears it is.
Yeah, there is a problem with the far right. It is growing. It's dwarfed by the threat from Islamist extremism, but it's there. This individual, according to media in France, is known to authorities that he had allegedly taken part in an attack on a migrant camp a year ago. There may have been people injured in that incident as well. This investigation is being led by the anti-terrorist prosecutors in France. They say they haven't established an exact motive for it at this stage. We're still fairly early on. It's only a couple of hours ago that this shooting took place. As you say, 3 people now confirmed to have died.
Do we know anything about them, Mark?
The site of the shooting was a Kurdish cultural centre in the 10th arrondissement, which is in central Paris, not too far from the Gare du Nord railway station there. We understand that the 2 people who died were Kurdish. We don't know about the injured people at this stage. 2 of them supposedly in a critical condition. That area is still sort of an active crime scene, as you would imagine. The public are being urged to keep away from that area of central Paris. You could imagine, of course, today of all days, it was massively busy in there as people are preparing for the Christmas weekend.
In London, other major capital centres, are the police always on high alert for this sort of incident?
Yeah, they are. I was interviewing a senior counter-terrorism officer just a couple of weeks back who put out a warning to people just to be extra vigilant at this time of year, especially with the threat from Islamist extremism, because it is often around the Christmas period, these times when, of course, many people will come together in mass gatherings, that they are targeted by the likes of Islamist extremism. But I think it goes to show that in tandem with that is the growing threat from the far right as well, if in the fullness of time that is what this appears to be at this stage.
Just want to bring Emma Burnell in here. Of course, the far right were involved in the killing of the Labour MP, Jo Cox.
Yeah, absolutely. And, yeah, there is a history of terrorist attacks from the far right. In the US, we had Timothy McVeigh in the Oklahoma bombing. Over here, there was the bombing of the Lord Admiral pub and a few other pubs.
That was the gay pub, wasn't
it? The gay pub, and then there was also a bombing in Brixton, which seemed to be targeting black people. So this is not without a history, and I think it's really important that we don't go into that lone wolf language, that we do, as Mark's saying, see this as a growing threat and make sure that it's taken seriously by our security.
Absolutely. Now, Mark White, you've got another big story today you're involved with. It involves yet another blow to the airlines, which then means another blow to the long-suffering passenger. What's going on?
Yes, that's all linked to the Border Force strike, which is seeing 1,000 officers who would normally be manning these passport controls at major airports, including Heathrow, Gatwick, Manchester, Glasgow. walking out for an 8-day period. And what that's meant is that the airlines, as you say, already very severely affected by the pandemic and worldwide, having to make many thousands of people redundant, well, they're being hit again because what they're having to do is plan for potential holding patterns over hub airline destinations like Heathrow. Now, anybody that's flown into Heathrow knows that they often have to go into a hold pattern for sometimes many minutes. Well, now, taking into account that we could have significant delays because of the passport strikes as well, they're being told, the airlines, British Airways, we've managed to see an internal memo from British Airways management to its pilots, telling them, instructing them that they have to, if they're a long-haul flight, take an additional hour's worth of fuel for that hold pattern. Now, the thing is, you think, OK, it's an hour's worth of fuel, which is actually thousands of pounds more that they're having to pay. But it's actually more than that, because if you're on a long-haul flight from, say, Singapore, and it's 14 hours, you're carrying all that additional weight of more fuel. And you need more fuel to then burn to carry that weight for 14 hours. So it's actually much more than just an hour's extra fuel that you need at the end of the day.
And that fuel extra cost, it will be passed on inevitably to the passenger.
Well, that's it. That's the sad thing about it.
Expensive.
It's difficult. It's difficult for the airlines, of course, to have to deal with this in the interim, but they will have no choice but to pass that on to the weary passenger who's not just putting up with the inconvenience of potentially having flights cancelled, at best, maybe facing very long queues, but they're also, at some point, going to have to pay for extra ticket fares as well.
Just to be clear, just finally, Mark, the delays to passengers will be coming back into Britain, not going out.
Well, it could all have a knock-on effect.
Right.
I mean, what happens when you have a delay at passport control is people are stacking up in these queues there. Then you get the airports telling the individual airlines that are landing, can you hold at the gate, at the terminal gate? Don't disembark your passengers to add to these queues. And of course, while they're at the gates, then other arriving airliners can't get into those gates. They can't just stack up on the taxiways, some will, so they're in the hold, and all of that can have a knock-on effect even for flights leaving.
Miserable. Christmas Grinch, isn't it? Thank you, Mr. Trade Union leaders. But not all misters, of course. Quite a few of them are...
I should say, but Border Force are saying, actually, that at the moment, there's not much in the way of delays or queues. But there's 8 days.
There's 8 days.
There's plenty of opportunity.
Well, thanks for that. That's Mark White, who is our Home and Security Head. I'm joined now by the travel editor at The Sun, Lisa Minnow. Lisa, good afternoon to you. It's going to be chaos pretty much everywhere, isn't it? The roads are jammed, the highway workers are on strike, and now we've got the problem with Border Force.
That's right, and of course the trains as well. So, I mean, really, there's very little forms of transport, bar a bus or a bike, where you're not going to find yourself really struggling this Christmas.
What advice, I mean, the trains are on strike on Christmas Eve, Lisa, but during the last strike, there were far more trains operating, for instance, from Paddington, where I was travelling from last week. Is there a sense that fewer train staff are going on strike now, as some suggestion the support for the strike may be crumbling?
I mean, I think there might be some idea that, yes, the support for the strike isn't perhaps as strong as it was. But in terms of what's happening this weekend, traditionally there were never any trains on Christmas Day. Boxing Day was the first day you could get a train. Now there will be no trains on, basically from almost first thing tomorrow morning on Christmas Eve. Although RMT are saying that it's actually going to be, rather saying 3 o'clock. If you're looking at those intercity services, the last services sort of are coming into London perhaps at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning. My own train service, which is a commuter train service into London, last train at midday. Now, that's obviously going to have a huge impact on people travelling home for Christmas, but also for the hospitality industry. So it's going to have serious impact. And also, this is not now just for this small period of time. There is going to be some form of industrial action from now all the way through until January the 9th, The ban on overtime means that there's very few trains working, even on the days when we are not having strikes. But by the same token, strike days themselves, about 20% of services are working. I think it's much easier in London, obviously, to get around because we've got the underground, but other parts of the country, there are absolutely no trains at all.
So best advice, Lisa, check online to see if there are any trains running at all. But is the information online accurate?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you have to wait until the actual timetables for the strike days are actually published. And at the moment, we don't know what those timetables are for the 3rd and 4th of January, as well as the 6th and 7th of January, which is the next time that we are going to have strike action. There's also an ASLEF train or drivers strike on the 5th of January as well. So this is going to continue all the way into the new year, this disruption.
Sorry to hear that. That's Lisa Minot, the travel editor at The Sun. Well, the ambulance workers from the Unison Union will stage 2 more strikes next month in a dispute over pay. It's been announced thousands of staff from 5 different services in England are walking out on 2 separate days in January, although a planned strike on December the 28th has been suspended. Not quite clear why. The January strikes will affect London, Yorkshire, the North West, North East and South West. And we've already seen NHS services disrupted this week and, of course, a threat to patient safety. So is it now time for the government to go live with their threat to change the law to stop blue light staff like ambulance workers walking out at all? That's the case for the police. It's the case for the army. Should it be the case for the ambulances? Joining me now is former Conservative MP and Health Minister Edwina Currie. Edwina Currie, I was very struck by something Mark Drakeford, who is the First Minister in Wales, Labour. He runs the NHS in Wales because it's devolved. He said if nurses are given higher pay, there'll be fewer treatments, fewer nurses and less cash for the NHS. Why doesn't the Conservative Prime Minister Rishi Sunak say that?
Well, I think that's at least in part because nurses do have higher pay. On average, a qualified nurse with a bit of experience is on £37,000 a year. She or he is actually much better off than most of the people that they are treating. And in a way, Andrew, Mark has put his finger on something significant because the NHS has got about 12% more money now than it had in 2019 before COVID. But it's doing 5% fewer treatments. One of the reasons is that we are paying people better. Another reason, obviously, is that a lot of other care gets more expensive. Cancer care has come on by leaps and bounds, but it is not cheap. Every time we have a new drug that really works, it costs a lot of money, and so on. So what the First Minister of Wales has realised, and it's a pity that more people don't realise it, is that if all the money goes into paying staff more money, you end up not with more staff. You just end up with not being able to do quite so much for everything else.
No, and I don't want to appear like the Christmas Grinch here about nurses, but it was also pointed out to me by a government minister the other day, if you add the £37,000 with the pension contribution, which is a very generous pension contribution from the taxpayer, the salary package is closer to £50,000.
Quite a few of them are, if they got the 19% pay rise that they are demanding, they would put themselves promptly into the higher rate tax brackets. I don't think any of them have realised that. There's something very uncomfortable about the nurses' strike. I don't think they've got anything like a majority for it. They've announced some results trust by trust. The law says you've got to have 50% overall partaking in this. But it's very obvious that the vast majority of trusts in England are not in favour of strike action. And indeed, even in the handful of those trusts where there is strike action, the nurses are often on the picket lines only for a few hours and then they're going back in. So there are a lot of people who are quite uncomfortable about this. I tell you what, my conspiracy theory is, Andrew, it'd be a really good idea if somebody on GB News investigated. I think a couple of years ago, some very senior union people thought, look, we really need to damage this government. We want to fight this government. And the best way to do it is in a coordinated action with strikes that really has which have the sympathy of the public, and then they will end up voting this government out. Now, how do we do that? Well, let's put up some sympathetic people for the senior official posts in some of these unions. And if you have a look, you'll see that there's some very new faces leading these unions, like Pat Cullen at the head of the RCN. they're paid an absolute fortune. You know, the salary for that kind of job, I think the basic is £197,000 a year, which, dare I say it, is one of the reasons why some of them look quite well fed. But I think what's happening is a really concerted effort through strike action to damage the government in the eyes of the public. Now, I'll add 2 points to that, if I may. The first is that governments of any ilk, of any political persuasion, should not give in to strikes, because if they do that, all you're going to get is more strikes. Yep. And also, governments should not give in to inflationary or even higher than inflationary pay rise demands, because all you will get is more of the same. So governments shouldn't do that. It's no accident, right, Andrew, and you and I remember this, that it's more than 30 years since the strike was used as a political instrument, and that is because Margaret Thatcher saw down strikes, it was very clear that government was not going to accept any action that had a strike behind it.
All right, that's Edwina Currie, the former health minister. She always tells it as she sees it. Emma Bennell, I could feel you getting crosser and crosser and crosser.
Well, more and more bemused, to be honest. The idea that it's the nurses that have made people think badly of this government rather than the last year and the behaviour of the government, at least over the last year, if not over the last 12. People have had enough of the government. It's not the nurses that have to tell them that, it's our own eyes.
Right, that's Emma Bennell. We're going to be talking more to her in the programme. She is a playwright and journalist. Next up, it's GB News People's Poll. We'll be shedding some light on your views at home on the strikes, that Rwanda plan, the premiership of Boris Johnson. Remember him? So don't go anywhere.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Well, it's time now for this week's GB News People's Poll. Let's take a look at some of those findings. Well, earlier this week, the High Court ruled the government's plan to relocate asylum seekers to Rwanda is lawful after legal challenges from charities and campaign groups. 40% of the public support the government on Rwanda, 29% oppose it, 12% don't have a view, 12% neither oppose nor support, 18% say they don't know. And when asked about whether they agree or disagree that nothing in Britain works anymore, a majority, 57% agree. That includes me, by the way. And let's get some more analysis of the polls with the academic and Professor of Politics, Matt Goodwin. Matt, afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
The government will be heartened, at least, I think, on the Rwanda figure, 40%, but I thought the figure might have been higher.
Yeah, we've had quite a few polls on this policy issue. They generally show that more people support the plan than oppose it. The numbers go much higher, as you might expect, if you look at Conservative and Leave voters. About 2/3 or thereabouts of those voters say Rwanda's a good plan. More generally, if you actually ask people about the situation in the Channel, the small boats and migration, over 60% of the country now feel that Britain's borders are out of control, would like to see less migration overall. And so this issue isn't going away anytime soon. It's the second issue for all Conservatives in the country, their second top priority. It's the third issue for all voters. So I suspect we'll be talking about it for a while yet.
Yeah. Also, what I thought was really interesting in the poll, Matt, we're on our third Prime Minister this year, unprecedented. It's unprecedented to have three former Prime Ministers sitting on the Conservative benches. But of the three, that's Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, remember her, anybody? Boris seen as the most competent.
Yeah, that's right. So among all voters, he's seen as the most competent of the three. I'd like to meet the 3% who said Liz Truss was the most competent. But among Conservatives, it goes much higher. Among Conservatives, Johnson leads Sunak by 40 points. I mean, it goes to show, actually, that Johnson's brand is still actually exceptionally strong among Conservative voters. And Rishi Sunak is still clearly seen with some suspicion, actually, among Conservative voters. And he's 3 months into the job, obviously trying to turn the ship around. But his ratings are not as strong as perhaps he might have hoped.
Do you think that's some reaction to the budget taxing us ever more, Matt, or the fact that some people still haven't forgiven Sunak for stabbing Boris in the back? He did resign from the cabinet after all, and it was just days later Boris was a goner.
I think there's a bit of that thrown in. I think it's also the politics of inflation. I think Sunak is in number 10 as these big crises are sweeping through the country. I mean, if you look back at 2022 globally, you look at all the elections that have happened around the world, incumbents have either been kicked out of office or have been dramatically weakened, from Emmanuel Macron in France to Joe Biden in the US, from Sweden to Italy, and beyond. So I think partly Rishi Sunak is just finding himself in the hot seat as all of these crises really sweep through the country. But on the other hand, as you say, among Conservative members, among the sort of more diehard supporters, if you like, Sunak has clearly struggled to win over that section of the electorate, largely, I suspect, because he never really had the mandate from members or indeed from voters. So he's already begun from quite a weak position within the parliamentary party.
And there's no comfort for Rishi Sunak either, is there, in this poll, Matt? As we go into a new year, the Tory party is still very much flatlining in a pretty low place.
22%. I mean, this is wipeout territory at the next election. This is worse than John Major did in 1997. And to make it even worse for Sunak and his team, we've got Reform this week on 8%. YouGov have had them on 9% recently. Labour are still riding high at over 45% in the polls. Labour are the most trusted party now, bizarrely, on immigration and Brexit, two issues that the Conservatives should really be owning. So, look, if I was Rishi Sunak sitting down to think about what are my resolutions this year, I got priority one is win back Brexit voters. Priority two is get control of this economy and start reforming the NHS so it actually works. And then I've got to really deal with this issue on the borders, because Conservatives really do care a great deal about a system that, in my personal view, I think rightly, they've concluded is no longer fit for purpose. And if he comes out of the gate in 2023, shooting on all of those flanks, I think he's got a chance of trying to turn things around, particularly if inflation starts to fall and interest rates start to come down through 2023. But everything's against him at this point. I've never seen the Conservative vote this weak in a very, very long time.
All right, that's Matt Goodwin, who's a professor of politics. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Matt. Emma Bennell, now you were furious when Edwina Currie was talking. You're now smiling and beaming from ear to ear because the Tories are flatlining at 22. Matt Goodwin there saying if that was repeated at a general election, they'd be wiped out. It won't be what happened at the general election.
No, I don't think it's going to be a wipeout in those terms. But I think if I were in Rishi Sunak's team, I'd be really worried that Boris Johnson is seen as more competent than me, because that's Rishi Sunak's big sell, that he's the competent guy, and that was always what he was trying. He was trying to contrast himself throughout the Johnson government. I'm the safe pair of hands guy. Johnson does the Stardust, I do safe pair of hands. If he can't do safe pair of hands and he's got no Stardust, what does he have?
Indeed, that's Emma Bennell. Now, she's with me in the studio until 2 o'clock. Now, in Scotland, north of the border, they approved yesterday a new self-identification system for people who want to change their gender. The new rules lower the age that people can apply for gender recognition certificate to 16 and removes the need for medical diagnosis. It's a very controversial move, and we've got a lot to talk about on that. But first, it's your news update.
It's 1:33. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. And we start in France, where 3 people have been killed and several others wounded after a gunman opened fire in central Paris. A 69-year-old suspect has been detained by police in connection with the attack, which took place at a Kurdish cultural centre. According to French media, the suspect was known to police and allegedly attacked a migrant camp last year. Officers in Paris say they're investigating racism as a possible motive behind the shooting. Nurses in England have threatened to go on strike again on the 18th and 19th of January. The Royal College of Nursing says the walkout will go ahead unless the government opens negotiations over pay. Meanwhile, the GMB's called off a post-Christmas strike by ambulance workers in England and Wales on Wednesday. They'll now strike on January the 11th. The union's National Secretary Rachel Harrison thanked the public for their support.
The public are deeply worried about our NHS. And we are too. People across the country have been incredible in backing our members and NHS workers, and we care so much about them. That's why we are suspending the proposed GMB industrial action on the 28th of December. We know the public will appreciate being able to enjoy Christmas without any additional anxiety.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister's apologised for Christmas travel disruption following strike action by Border Force staff today. Gatwick, Birmingham, Cardiff, Glasgow and Manchester airports are all affected. However, Heathrow does claim it's operating as normal. Military personnel and volunteers from the civil service have been trained to step in. And George Cohen, part of England's 1966 World Cup winning team, has died aged 83. Cohen played every minute of the victorious campaign on home soil and in total won 37 caps for his country. His former club Fulham announced his death this morning. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2069 and €1.1363. The price of gold is £1,489.29 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 sits 7,473 points.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Now, will Rishi Sunak's Conservative government overturn that new law set by the Scottish Parliament that makes it easier for people to change their gender? The Gender Recognition Reform Bill will remove the need for a medical diagnosis of gender dysphoria to obtain a gender recognition certificate, and you can do it from the age of, get this, 16. The Scottish Parliament says they'll resist any attempt by the Westminster Parliament to intervene. Let's talk now to the co-founder of Thoughtful Therapists, James Esses. James, you wrote an article in Spike magazine this week expressing your very real concerns about safeguarding and sex-based rights.
That's right, Andrew. I mean, it's a terribly sad day to see this legislation go through in Scotland. We need to think about who's spoken out against this. Internally within the United Nations, the Equality and Human Rights Commission, women's rights groups, children's rights groups, academics, lawyers, and the Scottish electorate themselves have all said that they had significant concerns about this. And the Scottish Parliament, led by Nicola Sturgeon, have simply nodded this through. And there's a real concern that this removes all of the checks and balances that existed under the previous legislation to obtain a gender recognition certificate. And I've said that, in essence, this throws both women and children under the bus.
Is your principal concern, James, the age of the children? They're only 16, not old enough even to buy alcohol legally. Or is it also the fact that the medical element is being removed from it completely, the process?
It's a combination of the two. Yes, I mean, you've given that analogy. I use the analogy that a child in Scotland cannot buy some fireworks to celebrate Halloween, but can now legally change their sex. The removal of a need for a gender dysphoria diagnosis risks missing children and young people for whom transitioning is not the appropriate pathway. We've seen recent evidence put forward by the NHS in England that even socially transitioning in childhood can potentially be irreversible and lead to a slippery slope towards further medicalisation. So I'm concerned about children. I'm also concerned about women's rights.
Yeah.
This basically introduces a form of self-ID without checks and balances to make sure that people applying for these certificates are genuine and are not using it for improper motives.
Well, there is the fear that's been voiced in this debate, and you know it better than me, is that sexual male predators will self-ID to change their gender and then access female-only spaces. I'm thinking of dressing rooms in a department store, for instance, swimming pool.
Well, this is the risk. And this isn't to say that all people obtaining these certificates are predators, not at all, but it opens up the system to abuse, particularly when we consider the recent Scottish Court of Sessions ruling, which says that if you obtain a gender recognition certificate, not only does it change this notion of gender, it legally changes your sex under the law. And we saw some members of the Scottish Parliament putting forward some ridiculous statements. Maggie Chapman, who represents the Green Party, stated that in her mind, sex is not binary. And my advice to Maggie would be to open up a GCSE biology book.
Just finally on this, the Westminster government would be entirely in its rights to interfere and to change this law because they became involved in Northern Ireland when abortion was decriminalised in 2019. By 2021, there were still no abortion services available, and the Westminster government intervened to protect on the rights of women.
Well, I was very pleased to see strong statements come out from the Secretary of State for Scotland and for the Minister of Equalities, and they've emphasised their concerns on the well-being of women and children. They could intervene, it seems, under the Scotland Act, Section 35, particularly given the fact that this legislation could impact equalities legislation under the Equality Act 2010 that affects the entire country. So I and many others are sincerely hoping that the UK government does get involved on this because the stakes are far too high.
Indeed they are. That's James Esses from Thoughtful Therapists. Thanks so much for joining us, James. Emma, I know you feel incredibly strongly about this.
I really do. I am a radical feminist. I'm an increasingly radical feminist these days. And it feels like we've gone backwards. I believe very firmly in sex and sex-based rights, and that is what I've spent my life fighting for. It's what my mother raised me to fight for. I don't believe in... Gender is a social construct that says if you like pink, you belong in this box, and if you like blue, you belong in that box. And it just pushes us into these stereotyped roles. I've always loved artists, for example, that play with gender. David Bowie, Annie Lennox, Grace Jones, Prince, people like that who said, you know, I am a man or a woman, but I'm not going to be constricted into that role that society says belongs to me. And I feel like, for some reason, the progressive side have gone backwards and started saying, no, if you stick to that stereotype, you are therefore a man or a woman, no matter what your body looks like. I think we are putting women and girls at risk.
Tell me why you say that.
Because I have often said, when it comes to the whole not all men thing, we absolutely know that not all men are rapists. We just don't know which ones are. And the worry that I have about access to single-sex spaces, which are what are reserved under the Equality Act 2010, is that it's now going to be seen as very, very hard for a young girl like me, aged 8, flashed at in a public space, to challenge the person who's flashing at you, to challenge the person who is behaving in a way, because you will be seen as the one in the wrong. I was able to go and get someone older and say, could you make this not happen? And that was absolutely fine. They were the miscreant. Who is the miscreant now? That's the problem.
And just finally, do you
And
want...
also, sorry, just one more
Yeah.
thing. The people I'm really, really worried about are the most vulnerable women in society, those in prison. And the fact that they voted down an amendment to stop sexual predators being able to obtain a gender recognition certificate so they can access female prisons, that, for me, just shows how little they've thought about the women's rights in all of this.
That's Emma Burnell. This is a story that will run and run, as they say. Now, the 1966 World Cup hero George Cohen has died at the age of 83. The Premier League announced just earlier today. He used to play for Fulham. He was a defender, and he had 37 caps for the England team. Fulham have released a statement in which they say everyone at Fulham Club is deeply saddened to learn of the passing of one of our greatest ever players and gentleman, George Cohen, CBE. I'm joined now by former professional footballer Mickey Quinn. Mickey, the members of the 1966 World Cup winning team were towering figures in football. I'm thinking of Bobby Charlton, Jackie Charlton, of course the late Bobby Moore. George Cohen was among them.
Oh, a footballing English god. That's the only way I can put them into that context, Andrew. I was very lucky enough to be coached by Alan Ball, a teammate of George Cohen in that famous 66 World Cup winning team. And I don't think, I mean, they won the World Cup, but I don't think these guys got the respect from a lot of people around the world, what they achieved. You know, George was a one-club man, a fantastic right-back. I think it was George Best saying he's one of the best right-backs in the world. And to win, to get the epitome of your professional career, which is winning a World Cup, Andrew, very few get to that elite status. And I don't think it was till late 80s, 90s, we started to appreciate what the likes of George and the World Cup winning team of 66 achieved. I think there's only two still alive. To me, Alan Ball spoke so highly of George that he knew that when they were playing, every time he could get forward, cross the ball and supply, the ammunition for the forwards, because he knew George was so rock solid behind him in that right back position. But I was privileged to meet George as well through Alan Ball, and he was a fantastic guy as well, a genuine person.
And it's sad, isn't it? Because these guys just didn't get the financial reward, anything like what the players are earning now, millions. I remember reading that when Jeff Hurst, who scored the hat-trick in that 1966 World Cup, quit football, he signed on the dole.
Yes, and of course, Bobby Moore, I remember, had to buy 2 tickets to get in a football match, in the late 70s. It's ridiculous. You look at a lot of footballers now, and they haven't achieved half of what these guys achieved, and they're getting knighthoods as well. I think that, like I said, there's only 2 of that 11 that started in that World Cup still alive, Jeff Hurst and Sir Bobby Charlton. And, I don't think in my lifetime England will ever win another World Cup. I don't think we've got that blend of what them guys had. Strong character, mental, physical, tremendous ability, tremendous team spirit as well. And George in that World Cup played in every game, which is unusual because coaches now, like to mix it up a little bit, rest players, in the group stage, so on and so on. So they were just fantastic players and fantastic people as well, Andrew.
Great to hear from you. That's Mickey Quinn, the former footballer, on the death of George Cohen, who's one of the heroes of the 1966 World Cup team. And if you've forgotten the score, England beat Germany 4-2. I wish I was old enough to have watched it. Well, you at home, are an important part of this show. We want to hear your views of the viewers and the listeners, so let's speak to some right now. Joining me now are 3 GB News viewers. We've got Miranda Richardson from Northamptonshire, Brian Dugan from Edinburgh and Malcolm Whiting from Lincolnshire. Good afternoon to you all. Miranda, let's start with you. Are you in the Christmas spirit?
Oh, I'm running a pub, Andrew, so I've no option to be in the Christmas spirit. It's lovely to see. We've got quite a few guests joining us over the next few days to celebrate their Christmas and have their time. For me, I don't really get Christmas till January, when I get to be with my family then. But for now, I'm doing what I do in hospitality. It's a tough gig, but ready to bring the Christmas cheer to everybody.
Well, and are you busy?
Fortunately, we are,
Good.
which is nice. I know there are some that aren't in the position to be busy, but we are. We've got quite a lot booked in over the next couple of days for dinner. People coming out and joining their families. What we're actually finding is more people are coming out because there's less cost and pressure at home. It sounds a bit strange, to come out and eat for dinner and come out and have reasonable, but by the time you've filled the fridges, by the time you've turned things on, by the time you've heated the home with all the family around, it's actually cheaper and easier to come out for dinner.
Oh, all right, that's Miranda. Best of luck and happy Christmas to you. Let's go to Edinburgh now. Brian Dugan.
Andrew, how you doing?
Very good.
I think I'll maybe go to Miranda's pub and enter into the Christmas spirit there. Sounds good.
Sounds great. Are you feeling very Christmassy, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a tough year for a lot of people, Andrew. So I think we all have to acknowledge that. Feeling pretty Christmassy in terms of spending time with family, with friends. We're congregating together for Christmas, which is great. It's important. I accept though that for other people that might not be as straightforward as other Christmases. We have the pandemic, of course, which intervened and made that very, very difficult for people. But with the circumstances around strikes, etc., and what's happening generally in terms of cost of living, it's been a tough year for people, and for some people,
all right,
it will be tough this Christmas as well.
All right, and let's go to Malcolm Whiting finally from Lincolnshire. Malcolm, how are you?
I'm very well, Andrew, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Pleasure.
And yes, I always get into the Christmas spirit, always enjoyed Christmas, always have a very quiet Christmas, just with immediate family. And I think it seems a funny, difficult time of year when, people only last really for 2 weeks of the year, to spend time with family and friends. But instead, at the moment, we still have strikes and everything that just is disrupting so much, which I find very frustrating. A lot of it is not immediately affecting me, but I do feel for the other people that, just want to travel, family, friends. And we don't ask for much over this time of year.
You're right. Malcolm, thank you for that. That was Miranda Richardson, Brian Dugan and Malcolm Whiting, our GB News friends. All have a very happy Christmas, and we hope you're especially busy, Miranda. Now, Jenny Bond is joining me now. You know who she is, of course, the great authority on the royal family. Jenny, good afternoon to you. The King's speech, it's hard to even phrase it because she did it so well, the Queen, for so long. He's already recorded it. What are you expecting?
I think it will be very reflective. He's a very sentimental man, as you know, and I think he will talk quite a lot about the loss, obviously, of his mother, maybe of his father too. So I think there'll be a lot of sentiment. It might be quite different. I think the imagery will be important. We're not actually sure where exactly it was recorded, but it has been recorded. And I think it'll be quite special, and I think a lot of people would tune in this year.
And we understand there is a reference to Meghan and Harry. I imagine whatever he says will be conciliatory.
Absolutely. It's all about unity. When the Queen gave her first speech, more than 70 years ago, well, exactly 70 years ago, I suppose, she said it was all about unity. And that's what her grandfather also, George V, said, that it was that was the first wireless speech that was given. And he said it was about unity of the great empire. And we could do with a bit of unity right now, I mean, in the world, in the country, and certainly within the royal family. And I think that's what Charles will be trying to do, hold out that olive branch. If he mentions Harry and Meghan, as you say, it will be conciliatory, I'm quite sure.
And just finally, Jenny, on Christmas Day itself, Sandringham, will we see them going to church as they always did with Her Majesty the Queen?
Yeah, I mean, that's another centrepiece. For lots and lots of people, they like to go out and watch the royal family arrive at the church and then leave afterwards. It's part of their Christmas celebrations. An opportunity for the family to walk about. We might see little Louis this time, along with his mum and dad, William and Catherine. So there'll be a full complement of royals up there at Sandringham. And a time of nostalgia, obviously, the first without the Queen, but a time, again, of the family coming together in some harmony, we hope.
Absolutely. That's Jenny Bond, the royal commentator. Thanks so much for joining us. Now, it is Christmas, and we've been talking about Christmas. By the way, we won't be seeing Prince Andrew at Sandringham on Sunday. He's still banned. It's Christmas, and guess what, Emma?
Guess what,
Oh,
Andrew?
wow. Now, I was told I couldn't spend more than £5.
I spent just a titch more than £5.
You can open yours. Come on, I'm going
There
to
you
open
go.
mine.
We have
I hope it's not
bonded.
another picture of
No,
Meghan
I've got
and
you
Harry.
a nice present, I think. It's going to help you find your inner child, and it's something we've bonded over previously.
Right. Oh, my word.
It's
now,
my
that's a really
absolute
good present.
fave-
Millions of cats.
Ooh.
Now, that is a fizz bomb you put in your
Lovely,
bath. A Christmas
fabulous.
tree fizz bomb.
And a candle.
And a candle. Christmas candle.
Thank you
Millions
very
of
much.
cats. Well, happy Christmas.
One of my favourite childhood books.
Well, I'm enjoying
so
that.
I hope
And
you'll love it.
Emma is going now to a crisis centre, putting me to shame. So, happy Christmas, Emma. That's it. You've been watching Andrew Pierce. Have a very, very happy Christmas. I'll see you in the new year. But next, it's the briefing with Arlene Foster. Don't go anywhere.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing, your afternoon fix of all the latest political news, debate and analysis. I'm Arlene Foster here in my seasonal and now traditional sparkly top, and here's what's coming up over the next hour. Another day, another strike as Royal Mail postal workers and Border Force staff are on a walkout over pay, jobs and conditions. Taliban security forces in Kabul have been enforcing the higher education ban for women by blocking their access to universities. And Joe Kennedy III has been confirmed as the United States envoy to Northern Ireland. Greg Swenson, chair of Republicans Overseas UK, will talk to me about this and how the UK-US relationship is going. As well as all of that, give me your political briefing. Send in your views and opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. First, here's the news with Rihanna.
Thank you, Arlene. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 2. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. 3 people have been killed and several others wounded after a gunman opened fire in central Paris. A 69-year-old suspect has been detained by police in connection with the attack, which took place at a